Good morning, good day, and good evening. Welcome back to the show. Today we have a returning guest. Welcome back to the show, Nick from the Linux Experiment. How are you doing?
Everyone. Well, I'm fine. As I was saying, I just got out of a week of COVID, so I'm now better, but I was not that great before.
When you record your videos, a lot of yours are like very sort of topical newsy stuff, so you don't really backlog anything, do you?
Not really, no. Generally, at most I'll have one full video recorded, but
Mhm.
not yet edited. But that's the most. I plan all my topics way in advance at
Yep,
the
yep.
end of the previous month, but and I sort of deviate from it if there's really something really huge. But generally, I just stick to the plan, my 12 or 13 videos per month,
Mhm.
and I just record them as they go. Generally, I've only a script in advance, a script
Yep,
or
yep.
two, but that's it. No completed videos to be ready.
Yeah, where you've got yourself in like sort of a better situation where you're not uploading like, 6 times a week.
Yeah.
But you also edit your videos a lot heavier than I do. Uh, how long do you actually spend editing a video, by the way?
It really depends. The news videos are kind of quick because it's just basically news articles scrolling and sometimes just my face, so they're relatively easy. I'd
Mhm.
say three hours maybe for these ones, and another video of 15 or 20 minutes on a topic is generally gonna take like 6 hours.
Mhm.
Just like recording all the B-roll and slotting it in
Yep.
and making sure everything feels tight and removing all the parts where I talk too much that are super boring. It's generally I record about 30 minutes and the end video is like 15. So
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I'm really bad at speaking on camera, and I've noticed that the longer I'm doing YouTube, the sort of the pickier I get with how I'm saying a word. Like I'm starting to notice exactly how I articulate certain
yeah.
words, and my videos that are like 15 or so minutes long usually takes minimum an hour to record. There's no like I could go with the 10 earlier takes and it'd probably be fine, but no one else besides me is going to care about a slight different, intonation of a word.
There will be one person that
Sure.
cares.
Well, they'll care if you
You'll
say
get the one comment saying, "Oh, you pronounced that weird."
they'll care if you say if if you start talking about Gnome, there's always going to be that
Oh yeah.
one person who's like, no, it's Gnome, and the other person goes, no, it's Gnome. I'm just like, I don't care.
Yeah, it's to the point that when I did my GNOME 44 review, I literally prefaced it with, "Hey guys, I'm gonna say GNOME because that's how they say you're supposed to say it."
Yep,
But
yep. Yeah, I did see that one up. I Someone asked me the other day, like, are you gonna do a video on GNOME 44? Like, I've literally never done a video about any version of GNOME. I don't know why you're asking me. Um, is there something exciting that happened with this version that? Because I got multiple people asking me about it, so it's really
it's
confused.
it's not a huge one. Like it just refines the quick settings. It adds background app support, which
Mm-mm.
could in the future be a system tray replacement, but is definitely not right now. And basically, that's about it in terms of major big things.
Mm-mm.
What was interesting to me in this one was that they sort of focused on adding stuff that people have really been asking for.
Right,
And
right.
I don't know if it's just like a magical moment where all the work they were doing just coalesced in this version specifically
Mm-mm.
and not a conscious decision. But you got the ability to disable overlay scroll bars, you've got the thumbnails in the file picker, you've got the beginning of
Hold on
something.
a sec. There wasn't thumbnails in the file picker before.
Not in GNOME for 14 years. You did not have that. Like some file pickers implemented a hack that
Yeah,
showed a
yeah.
side panel with it, but generally
Right.
no. You just didn't have an icon grid. You just had a
Huh.
list view which had no thumbnails. So I don't know
Huh.
what was blocking that, but that was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's fixed finally.
Mm-hmm.
And you have like a bunch of cool quality of life options that people have been saying GNOME needs this. It's ridiculous they don't have it, and they all landed at the same time. So I don't know if it's a conscious decision to try and focus more on what people actually wanted,
Yeah.
but that was what was interesting to me in this one specifically. In terms of pure new features, there's nothing huge or anything.
Mm-mm. I did see there's like little like I occasionally will do videos about random things that are going on in the background, like how there's HDR being worked on, things like that. But I didn't know that about that file picker issue.
Yeah. It's been like one of the biggest pet peeves of everybody who has like something against GNOME. They're like, this sucks. Why isn't it here yet? Every release, you get a comment. Still no thumbnails. Still no thumbnails. Well, now they're there. 14 years later. It was terrible.
Pretty much my main experience using GNOME is I've never like properly daily driven it, so I'm not really in a position to really comment on whether it's great or not. It seems like they're doing cool things. The maintainership and how they act with certain people coming into the project is, you know, and it's not everyone, but there are certain people that are a little bit, you know, a bit aggressive.
Yeah, they have a very low tolerance for any criticism, basically. Yeah.
But my main experience with the GNOME is just because of the sort of the mindset around how people outside of GNOME view it. A lot of people tend to get annoyed if they see someone running it, at least in my case. Maybe it's because I early on built up a lot of those like window manager kind of audience. Yeah. When I ran it, like when I was doing anything in a VM on stream, like when I was doing my LFS streams, I had a GNOME desktop just because it would bother people. Like I could have gone with anything else, but it's like, you know what? GNOME it is. And from that brief experience, it seemed fine. I know some people...
It's great. That's the one I use. I use it on my laptop and on my desktop. And like, I don't understand people saying that you cannot be productive with it or that it completely sucks. Like, you might not be used to the workflow it offers, and apart from using extensions, you can't really change that workflow. So I understand why people might be annoyed by it, but honestly, it just works fine. You press super, you type the name of the app, you press enter, it's done. Everything works, it runs. Touchpad gestures are insanely good on it. It's smooth, it's really easy to use, and applications look really good. They're all super coherent. If you care about that stuff, like having applications looking the same, feeling the same, having the same HIG, then you have to use GNOME. No other Linux desktop comes even close. But if you want power, customization, and settings, of course that's not the one you pick, and it's not designed for that at all. That's for sure.
I don't know if you saw the video that DistroTube put out the other day about, I think it was called like Linux has become complicated and limiting.
I could not have disagreed more with that. I talked about it on my Patreon cast, like the little podcast I do for Patreons and YouTube members. I don't want to do reaction videos. I think they're just stir up drama and they're not that great. But I mean, I respect.
I'm here with a 27-minute reaction video.
Yeah, I just, it's not my stuff.
No, I get it. It makes sense.
They can be fascinating. And honestly, on this one, I really debated it because I thought it's an exchange of opinion. It's not like attacking DistroTube or saying he's an idiot or whatever, because that's not the case. It's his opinion. But my opinion is the complete opposite. I think Linux has become way easier and way less complicated. Like before, it was all held by duct tape and string, and it just never worked right. And all the options to completely customize and tweak are still there. What you don't have is the fact that you need to fix your system every other day. You don't need to do that anymore. And you needed to 10 years ago, which seems to be the period DistroTube is referring to. And in terms of being limiting, I don't think it is either. Like, if you even have more choice than before, if you consider it. Since GNOME 3 was introduced, you got Cinnamon and you got Mate, which did not exist before. So like, they didn't plan on making sure that people created those, but in the end, you have more choice now than you ever had. And the same for init systems. You can replace systemd with other things. I don't really understand the opinion, and I totally disagree. It sort of felt to me like it was rose-tinted glasses, like really heavy nostalgia for the time where, like, Linux only half worked, and so every improvement was awesome, and every day you had something new and something brand new. Something I felt with Ubuntu, for example. I used Ubuntu from 2006 until, 2013 or 15. And every release, it was a major upgrade. Like all the things that changed, all the things that you couldn't do graphically, now you could. It was insane. And I do have nostalgia for that. But I don't have nostalgia for the fact that my hard drive would suddenly become unbootable, or my x.org server would die after an update, or dependency hell every time you install anything. No apps were packaged by anyone. You had to compile most of the stuff. It sucked. It was a bad time to be a Linux desktop user. Unless all you want is hacking and tinkering, it just was not good. And so, I don't really agree with what he's saying in this video. But, I mean, everyone is entitled to their opinions, of course.
Sure. Yeah, my general take on that video was... I think there is a place for both of these people on the desktop. There is a place for the people who want a desktop that just works. They want that Windows or Mac OS-like experience where you plug it in and it's just done. You don't have to worry about tinkering with anything, and you can, be a developer, do anything you want to be doing, and that's great. But there's also this place where, you can grab a window manager, you can grab, KDE, install a bunch of random stuff, customize your desktop to your heart's content, and really build a completely unique system. And there's nothing wrong with either of these approaches. Like, not everyone has to be, taking down that simple path. Not everyone has to be that hacker that messes around with everything. I think a sign that Linux is evolving and becoming a more, a more, how would I say it? A more
approachable, maybe?
Yeah, approachable. That's a good term. A more approachable system is the fact that you have both of these coexisting in the same space.
Exactly. When before, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you could only use Linux if you were okay with tinkering, tweaking, fixing stuff. Nowadays, you don't have to, but you still can if that's what you like. And that's the great thing. It's become more open in a way. It has more options. But you need to pick your options depending on what you want. And of course, if you start going with Arch and Sway and whatever, and trying to replace systemd with, I don't know, Init 5 or anything else, then if you're a beginner, you're going to have a hard time. It's going to suck. You're going to learn a lot, but it's going to suck. If you're experimented, it's going to be fun. You just need to pick the right option for you. And that's where the difficulty lies, basically, because you will hear many people telling you that you should never use Arch, just use Zorin OS, and people telling you should never use anything but Arch or anything but, I don't know, Nix OS, even if you don't know anything about anything.
Please don't use Nix OS if you don't know anything about anything. That's going to be a very bad experience.
Well, you're basically going to have to not install anything.
Sure. Yeah,
But yeah, I think it's a great place to be a Linux user these days. It's nice.
No, I completely agree. When I joined Linux, it was, what was it? It was probably someone's gonna. I uploaded a video when it happened, like 2019, something, probably earlier than that. I don't remember. I was already here, well into everything becoming, relatively user-friendly in this way. Like, it's not been this massive change since then, but even in this time that I've been here, you can certainly see there has been some polish that's gone into things to make it a little bit nicer. Like I think last year before, when Red Hat was bringing some people on to specifically work on accessibility with Gnome, they hired, I completely forgot the developer's name, but there was a blind developer who focuses on, purely doing accessibility stuff. And that's the sort of stuff that just wouldn't have happened 10, 15 years ago when it was this more of a hackery environment, plus the fact that there was less money in Linux back then, so really justifying that didn't really make any sense.
And there were so many other huge things that you had to focus on, like just having a solid display server that didn't die, having an automatic configuration of x.org. Sometimes in 2006, you had to write your xorg.conf file yourself. That's just unacceptable if you want to reach the normal people that just want to use a computer. So of course they focused on that and not accessibility. But now I think we're in a great place. And sure. I started my channel, I think it was in early 2018. And since then, I've seen the Linux desktop mature and move on, but it's not been like an enormous change, like you were saying. There's not been a revolution in terms of how usable it is. It's been getting gradually better. It's a linear curve, basically.
Yeah. I think the only thing you can really say has been a revolution is this sort of rise in containerized solutions like Flatpack and Snap to some extent, but Snap, because of the community opinion on it, sort of is still relegated to just Ubuntu. Most of the attention now has gone to Flatpak, and then AppImage could have done something, but the developer is not managing the project in the best way.
Well, I've seen a lot of aggression on this part as well. There was this moment where they reached out to a lot of app developers saying, "Hey, we can help with your packaging."
Yeah.
valid questions and interrogations were raised, and then they answered in like, "Oh, you're just depriving the community of an option. You're an idiot."
Yeah.
And yeah, that's not the best way of making sure people adopt your formats.
But Flatpack has made sort of a lot of things a lot simpler. Like there's a lot of applications like bottles, for example, where packaging this was kind of a nightmare because it is very particular about the versions of software that it needs. And just not you can get it running without doing that. But the problem is it's gonna perform a little bit differently depending on which system it's on, making it a lot harder for the developers to sort of properly work out what bug is caused by what they're doing, what bug's caused by the dependencies you're using, eliminating that and just having, okay, this is the universal package, makes it a lot simpler for these developers.
Yeah, and you're absolutely independent from distro updates because like with something as weird and complex and particular as bottles, if I don't know, it runs on Ubuntu releases an update to one of the libraries it needs, it could just completely break the app because it's very specific in that way. And one might say it's because the app is badly developed. It should be more, I don't know, compatible or be more flexible. But sometimes you just can't, or you just don't have time to do that for every single distro. So for these kind of applications, like containerized packages just makes super sense. That's not English, but it makes sense. Yeah, it works. It's what they were designed to, basically. They were designed to do that exactly, to remove all those barriers and obstacles that traditional packages have. And they will never probably erase all those traditional package management systems because you need libraries, you need underlying systems, you need the kernel, you need drivers, and Flatpak is never going to address that. It's not the goal. But I think it solves a lot of problems. That's been a major development in the Linux world for the past 3 or 4 years, yeah.
Well, I think it's been around... I don't even know how long it's been around for. I want to say at least 10 years, but it didn't really gain a lot of traction until very recently. I did see you did a video on Flathub and the concerns around corporatization. I did a video on this a while back. I was very positive about these changes. I think it's all around a good thing that they're making it easier for developers to have some sort of funding stream like this.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Like my opinions were like, I understand where the concern is coming from because as soon as there's money involved or investors, you don't know if the project is going to focus on users and not just on making money at the detriment of users. But honestly, for something like Flathub, I don't see how that could happen. And even if it does, there is literally no barrier or blockages to remove Flathub and just completely copy it and run something else. It's open source. Anyone could just make a copy and run it. Any distro already has the infrastructure and funding to run something like that. So if Flathub goes evil or corporate or whatever, I mean, anyone, Fedora, anyone that has a little bit of backing can just run a competitor and replace it entirely. It's super easy.
For anyone who didn't hear about what was going on with Flathub, basically, for a while now, they've been working on an account system so you can actually verify who are the official developers of a project. So, say, OBS, they distribute the OBS Flatpak. They can be marked as the official developers of this Flatpak. So basically, and along with this, they want to have a donation system so you can fund these developers. Basically, having it act more like a storefront rather than just a repository like it was before. Flathub's an interesting case because it sort of acts in a very similar way to the end result of it is basically the same as what you see over on the Snap side, where you have this singular store. But because from the start, Flatpak has had that ability to easily add in other stores, and you could go and make your own if you really wanted to, it's not really had that complaint, even though when you look at it, it's basically the exact same thing as Snap. Like, the only store that, I guess there's an exception for Elementary and Fedora's one, but really the only store that matters is Flathub. This idea...
But I think the main difference with Snaps is also that Flathub is open source and the Snap Store isn't. Like Canonical said, they could at some point open it up. That it was not like a we will never open it up thing, but they were citing the issues they had with Launchpad, which is their sort of versioning system, development environment. And they were saying everybody was clamoring for us to open it up. We opened it up at great cost and great effort to make the code legible, and no one used it and no one cared, and we wasted a lot of time and money on this, and it just had no impact. One could argue that because Launchpad actually kind of sucks if you look at it, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, that's the main difference as well. You can't really say that Flathub is like centralized and is trying to eat all the other remotes or repos, because it can't, because it's open source, and the whole Flatpack system is open source, where the Snap Store, you just cannot create your own Snap Store if you want.
A lot of these terms like centralization, and this is especially true in something like systemd, tends to like, it scares Linux users just as a term. A lot of people don't really think what that actually means in the practical application. Like, if we really think about it, the Linux kernel is a very centralized project. We can say, you can just fork the project, it's open source. You can't really, though. Like, it's such a massive project. Yes, there are these projects like the Zen kernel and things like that, but there's no one that can properly maintain a completely separate project unless we're talking about like Google with Android or Google with Chrome OS.
Google does not want to do that, because they've been, for years, they've been trying to go back to the mainline kernel, and since manufacturers do not want to make their drivers open source for their Android phones, they've been trying to work on a separate, like, it's basically the same thing as the GPL condom for the NVIDIA drivers. They've been trying to work on the exact same thing, but it's an Android condom, so drivers can be made proprietary but still work and be added into the kernel. That's what they're working on. They don't want to maintain their own version of the kernel. No one wants to, even Google. It's just such a massive headache, too much work.
I get the concern.
And there's no real reason to do that either. Like, why?
Yeah. I do get the concern around centralization, but
absolutely,
I don't think that just the idea itself is bad inherently. I think it's a matter of everything going on around. Like, what's the best way to think about it? How would I frame it? Now I actually need to think about it properly. So I have no idea how to properly frame this. Centralization is only... Actually, here we go. I think people jump the gun on what's going to happen if something is centralized. So you sort of assume that, okay, it's centralized, therefore it's going to, like Flathub, for example, therefore it's going to become like the Windows Store at some point. It's going to be this lockdown store where some specific company has complete control of it, and no one else can really do anything with it. But I don't think that is a foregone conclusion. It's not like just because there's this one thing that has primary usage in this space, it is going to become like that. If Flathub ever became this really locked down store that, you couldn't really do anything else with, like they tried to, they wanted to go proprietary with it or something like that, my assumption is a lot of people would want another store to form, and some other place would likely rise up to fill in that gap.
Absolutely. I think centralization is only bad when you cannot escape what the centralized project is. When you just have no choice but to keep using it, and there is no way to build a competent alternative. Basically, that's, if you take the smartphone market, that's what's happening. You cannot today build an alternative to Android or iOS. There's no way. It's centralized. You cannot do it.
Someone's going to say, but the Linux phones are great.
Yeah, but let's be honest, they're not an alternative right now. And
No.
even if they could work for you, like they're not an alternative for the mass market, they're not getting distributed.
Mhm.
You just cannot build a competitor. And that's where centralization is bad because you
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
escape it, which means they have control. With something open source or at least something like Flathub, you don't have that issue because even if all of a sudden they decide to go proprietary, to
Mm.
lock everything down, and every developer was already on board, well, you can just grab the code up to the point where they turn proprietary because they have to publish it. It's open, and you can just create your own and replace that. And I have zero doubts that developers would immediately jump ship.
Mhm.
The community is super picky about these things. As soon as there's anything remotely weird happening, they just move on and move to something else. So, like, being centralized in this case doesn't feel like a bad thing. It
Mm.
just feels like an easy thing, and there's no drawback to it. Not in
Mm.
this specific case, at least.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. On your own system, do you heavily make use of Flatpaks, or you use them like sparingly
I
on cases where you need it, or what's up with you?
I think I don't run a single app that is not Flatpak in
Oh
terms
wow.
of graphical
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
applications. I think even Steam is running as a Flatpak.
Okay.
Discord is a Flatpak right now. The only thing that I run that are not Flatpak are the things that are not packaged
Sure.
as Flatpaks. But for graphical apps, they just work. They're super easy. It's one
Mhm.
click install, always up to date. You don't have to wait for your distro to package anything. I've never had a single issue with those. And
Mhm.
the only ones that had problems were those where permissions weren't correctly set. Like some very small apps did not have access, for example, to my home folder, so that I could not
Yeah.
access any files. That's stupid. The packager made a mistake. Okay,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
install Flatseal, you just check one box and it's done. It's not that tricky. So yeah, I don't run anything that isn't Flatpak these days,
Huh.
apart from a few utilities that are not in there.
Okay. On my system, I sort of do it the other way round. I run everything as a native package, and in the places where applications just perform better, or it's just a good idea to use it like that, like with OBS, for example,
Yeah.
because on Arch, that's the only way to officially get the project to have the stream key integration, things like that. A couple other things like the FF14 launcher, the third party one that it just all sets up wine magically. I don't have to deal with it. The game just works. I don't think about it. And other little
If
things
it
like
works,
that.
if
Yeah,
it
yeah.
works, like there's no reason to refuse it. And I mean, I personally picked Flatpaks because like I know they work, they're always up to date. I
Mhm.
don't have a problem. If any single I'm not dogmatic about it. If an app I use stops working well
Mhm.
and the other version, like the native RPM version for Fedora works better,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
replace it. I don't care. It's just that for now, Flathub is my default source of app installation, and
Mhm.
I had no issues with them, so I keep using them, and I like the advantages it brings. And for now, I experience no drawbacks. But
Mhm.
as soon as there's something broken, I will not stick to the Flatpak like an idiot.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll move to something that works, of course.
So you're using Fedora right now, yeah?
Yeah, Fedora on my desktop and my
Mhm.
laptop. Yeah.
What do you think about the upcoming change with having Flathub be easily toggleable? Because it hadn't been like that before. You had to like run the command to go and do it.
Yeah.
And is it a Fedora 38 where they're going to easily add the toggle where it just sets it up?
Yeah, right now on Fedora, if version 37 and the older ones, if you had to tick the enable third-party repos,
Mm.
and it automatically added the Fedora Flatpak remote,
Yeah.
and a few other non-free sources. Now they're going to replace that Fedora Flathub remote, or as far as I understand it, replace it by Flathub, and I think it's
I
great.
think it was called the. I, th- I did notice this in your video actually. It's the Fedora Flathub remote is a separate thing from the Fedora Flathub selection. The Fedora Flathub remote is their one that is Flathub's made from the RPMs. The Fedora Flathub selection was their curated version of Flathub.
Okay.
I
Oh
I
yeah,
did
I didn't know
spot you
that there was a
mentioning that. I don't.
difference. Yeah.
It's one of these weird nitpicks that nobody besides the people who read every little bit of information are going to notice. But yeah, those are two separate things. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off there.
Well, Yeah, no problem. I mean, I didn't know that, so I learned something,
Yeah,
which is nice. So yeah, it's in Fedora 38. Now you're going to toggle the enable third-party repos, and you'll
yeah.
get Flathub by default. And I think it's great because if you're going to push Flatpak, there's really no real reason not to push Flathub with it right now.
Hmm.
I understand where they were coming from. Like, we don't want to ship by default a repo we don't control at all. We don't have any way of doing quality control on it. There are tons of third-party packages. Not everything on Flathub is official by the
Yeah,
original
yeah.
developers. And I mean, everything in the Fedora repos is unofficial by
Yeah.
design. It's like it's Fedora packaging those, or maintainers for Fedora packaging those. So they're not against third-party packages. They're just against third-party packages that they didn't check, which I can understand.
Yeah, yeah.
But at some point, with Flathub making moves to have those official like verification check marks and everything, the issue goes away. The user is informed. I mean, as soon as the graphical app stores implement support for that, which I don't know if they will or when, or but when they do, the user is informed, and there's no real issue with that. So I think it's a good move. I think it's better. It will save some time from the Fedora project to maybe stop maintaining their subset of Flathub on their own. And I think it gives more applications to users in one click, which is better. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Fedora and Debian are these weird distros that feel like they're kind of not in a bad way, but feel like they're like 10, 15 years in the past where they really still care about free software. A lot of the distros, like, Ubuntu, for example. Ubuntu, it does, like, you get proprietary software, you get free software, doesn't really matter. But Debian, for a long time, for example, didn't ship proprietary firmware with their ISO.
Yeah.
Fedora
Which
has...
made it a pain to use.
Yeah. Well, everybody, whenever they installed it, would just, or like, if you went for a recommendation, they would just say, grab the third-party firmware because it's just what you're going to need anyway. Unless you're using
mandatory for 99% of computers. So
yeah, unless you're using a system that can run LibreBoot, you probably need the third-party firmware. But Fedora is sort of the same way, and that's a big part because, American law, all that fun stuff, where it's like, okay, you have to really care about what we're shipping. Like with the H.264 situation.
yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, that was a fun one. And then when it came over and started affecting Flathub for a bit, I'm really happy with how Flathub addressed that. I don't know if you paid attention to how that ended up being dealt with.
I didn't look at how they did that, no.
Basically, there are now two versions of Mesa in Flathub. You have the neutered Mesa that has the H.264 and H.265 as well, just gone. Then you have a full version, and when you install OBS, it just installs the full version, and there's no problem. So you actually can, use it, which is great.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's transparent for the user. If you need the hardware acceleration, you'll get it, and if you don't want it specifically manually, well, you don't have it, and it's still pretty much okay.
Yeah.
If you have a recent computer, it's still pretty much okay.
Yeah. I get why they do it like that. It's really weird. Like Fedora got a lot of attention, I think over the past year or 2 years as this. A lot of people were pushing it on YouTube as this very user-friendly distro, and that's not to say that it's not. It's just not in the same way that Ubuntu is, for example. Like Ubuntu, as I said, Ubuntu doesn't really care if it's free software or not. It doesn't really care about the licensing in that sort of way. And I feel like some people hopped onto the Fedora train and were kind of pushing it in this way that didn't really represent the way that it really is, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but I made a video about that, but my angle was not, like, the video was titled Fedora is the new Ubuntu, and then I think a whole trend of videos titled in the same way started.
Yeah.
But, and maybe I was not the first to use the term, probably not. But my video wasn't like, Fedora is the new Ubuntu because it's so user-friendly, like it's instant usable. It was more like because they took the place of Ubuntu as the leader, the driver of the Linux desktop.
Sure.
But yeah, I would agree. Fedora is not the most user-friendly distro. You have to manually enable, for example, NVIDIA drivers. You can install them, but it's not as easy as in Ubuntu. They're not going to be pre-installed automatically if they detect your hardware, or it's not just a checkbox at install. And you have more stuff to go around, like for example the H.264 acceleration. You have more stuff to do to make your system completely able to run everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would agree. It's not as user friendly as Ubuntu or something like Zorin OS or Mint. It's still, like you said, stuck to the, we want the free software, the maximum free software experience, but we also want people to easily have access to stuff that is not free, but not too easily in the same way. So that they're between something like Debian, which is more extreme on that front, and something like Ubuntu, which is completely liberal and saying, you know what, install whatever we want. You don't care. Well, we don't care. Just toggle the things and it works.
Well, to be fair, you can go more extreme than Debian. You can run like Parabola OS, use Linux Libre, have no proprietary software in the repos, only run it on a 2006 ThinkPad and nothing else.
Yeah, but I mean, who does that?
There were numerous, maybe not in your audience, but there is a disproportionate number of people in my audience. That
well, sorry, I offended everyone then.
No, I do it all the time. It's great. They get very bothered by it when I'm like, no one runs these devices.
I mean, I totally understand it. Like, if you're gonna move to an open source system and push for open source, why not go all the way and trying to have, well, not even open source, but free software? Why not push for everything free software? I saw a recent thing about AMD at a conference. They're going to announce a new library that helps them support core boot natively for probably all of their CPUs. Which looked very interesting. I posted about it in one of my news videos. I think it was maybe in my news podcast maybe in about maybe 2 weeks. I can send you a link afterwards if you want.
If it's what you're talking about, I found something on Onyx from February. Maybe this is it.
I think that was it. Yeah, that might be it.
Completely
it was interesting.
Yeah, that completely slipped past my radar. That's really cool.
Yeah, and well, it's not clear if it's only going to be for server CPUs or if it's going to be for everything. But basically, it's an intermediary library that would be updated by them, that is open source, and that would allow core boot to interface correctly with every single one of their CPUs, which is really nice. And I understand why people would want that. If you run a completely free software experience on your computer, you also want your BIOS or UEFI or bootloader or whatever. You want everything to be free software. So I understand where they're coming from. It just gives you more control, basically.
Yeah, as much as I'm saying that, like, it's sort of out of place in the way that people use Linux now for there to be these distros, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, a common thing I say on my channel is, I do not care how you want to run your system. Like, I will give my opinion on things that I think are great and things that you shouldn't do, but at the end of the day, it's your computer. I couldn't care less what you want to do. If you want to chuck it out the window, go ahead and do it. If you want to run core boot, go ahead and do it. It's your computer. I really don't care. I might, make jokes about some of the things you're doing, but at the end of the day, if you want to do it, go ahead.
Yeah, I have the exact same approach. Like, and some people mistake giving an opinion for trying to influence their opinion, but that's not the case. Like, you're just saying, me personally, I do that, and yes, I also like to poke a few jokes at people who do like some stuff that I consider weird.
Yeah,
but like I was saying, I even made a video about like ad block and trying to remove YouTube and replace it with something. Like I said, it's gonna hurt my own business, but I don't care. It's your computer. You do you. If you want to install AdBlock, never give a cent to anybody, and just lock it down to only see what you want to see. It's your computer. If you want to try and hack for 10 days and make sure that everything runs like you want, do it. It's your fun, your life, your time.
Yeah.
I'm just out there giving my opinions on stuff, but it doesn't mean that I'm against what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen, especially in some of the we'll just call them Manjaro drama videos that I've done.
Yeah.
You'll see the occasional Manjaro user come in and be like, yeah, but this is a great experience for me. I love this distro. Like, that's fine.
That's
At the
cool,
end of the
yeah.
day, all I'm doing is saying, this is what they're doing. Let's laugh at them doing dumb things that don't make any sense. If you're having a great experience with the distro, use it. That's fine.
Yeah, by
I'm
all
not here to
means,
tell you
yeah.
not to use the distro. I'm not here to tell you to, go. I'm not this elitist Arch user telling you have to use Arch. If you want to use it, be my guest.
Use it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And but that also means that yes, we can have fun because
Yeah.
they forgot to renew their certificate for the 20th time, and they just say, people, just add an exception.
I forgot about that one. Right, they said, was it add an exception or roll back your clock?
Oh yeah, roll back your clock. Yeah, that was
something.
it. Like, it literally took them as much time to write the answer as it would have to renew the certificate. It's like, what are you doing? So yeah, but if Manjaro works for you, use Manjaro. Just like I made a video like a while ago, long while ago. It was, I don't recommend Ubuntu anymore, and I went into details why I thought it was not the best experience for newcomers anymore. But that doesn't mean that if you like Ubuntu, you should stop using it. It's just that, me personally, I don't think it's the best experience you can get. But if your experience is great, by all means, use it. It's great.
For anyone listening, you probably hear a dog barking next door. Yeah, I apologize for that. I like to have my window open because this room sort of turns into an oven very quickly. It's a relatively small room, and having the computer here, it heats up pretty quickly. But the next door neighbors have this, I don't know, I think it's a Mastiff or something. It's a big dog of some description, and it will sometimes just bark for 10, 15 minutes. It's gone now, so hopefully it doesn't start up again. It sort of gets in the way during video. Nope, there it is.
Oh, yeah.
It gets in the way during videos sometimes, which is great. And if I close the window, I overheat. So, you either get sweaty Brody or barking dog. Pick your poison, basically. Yeah, but I don't know. I think at the end of the day, just pick the distro that does what you need it to do. If that distro is a very... once again, going back to the thing about there are these hackery systems. If you want to have a system that is super hacker-friendly, go and run an Arch. Go and run a Gentoo. But if you want, to just install something, get some work done, hey, there's nothing wrong with using Ubuntu. I do think at the end of the day, a lot of people are very... There is definitely a lot of tribalism when it comes to different distros that are out there. It exists in anything. Like, it exists with game consoles. It exists with distros. It exists with operating systems. When people like something, they're going to want to defend it, even if it doesn't need defending. Like, your choice of operating system, your choice of distro
it doesn't matter. And no one cares. Like, no one cares what you run. It's okay. If you like it, you like it. It's good. There's no problem with that. That was my conclusion. What I made, that I remade my old packaging systems compared videos, because the old one was 3 years old and it was terrible. So I just remade it for people to discover a newer one, more up to date.
Oh,
and
that
the conclusion
one
was that
from like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And the conclusion was that it was, at the end of the day, it's just a way to get software. If your app runs and you like how it runs, you should not care. Like, if you run Ubuntu, run snaps. You don't have to go out of your way to remove them all and use something else. It's just software. What matters is the application and how it runs. If it runs well, you don't care about the packaging format. You shouldn't, probably.
These discussions...
And it's the same for a distro. Like, you shouldn't care. If it works, it works. And you don't have to convince people that it's the best thing ever, and you don't have to convince people that what they use is stupid. Who cares? It's their computer, their experience, their time.
Yeah, with that being said, it's not like there's anything wrong with having those discussions, but
of course.
At the end, all that really matters is, does the software work? Is it doing what you need it to do? And yeah, that's pretty much it. If it's not, then pick something else. See what happens.
It's a computer. It's a tool. What you want it to do is work. Or if it's just a hobby project, what you want to do is customize, then cool. It's supposed to do that. But what matters is, does your computer do what you need it to do? And if it's not, then you're not using the right thing. And if it is, then why change?
Yeah, I think a big part of this is the fact that everybody using Linux Like, anybody using Linux on the desktop is using Linux because they want to. Nobody using Windows is using Windows because they want to. They're using Windows because they have Windows. macOS is sort of very similar in this way, where you will buy a Mac system because you want a Mac system. Like, you don't just stumble into that experience.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people in both of these spaces can be very opinionated about, you know, what you're doing on your system. It's sort of, using Linux for a lot of people is a big part of their personality. It's like being a fan of a sports team. It's like, you know, there's probably other examples. Being a fan of a sports team is a good example. But I don't think I've ever seen a single Windows person ever be like, I love Windows 11. It's so, with the exception,
Windows.
with the exception of saying that the other version of Windows is bad. There's not really any teams in Windows. It's like, Windows 10 isn't good. It's Windows 11 is bad. Windows 10 isn't good. Windows 7 isn't good. Windows 10 is bad. That's sort of the way it tends to work on that side, it seems.
As time moves on, people start thinking that the older versions were awesome. Like, now you see a ton of people saying, wow, Windows XP was so great. Why did they change it? Do you really remember using Windows XP? It was horrible. It didn't get secure after maybe 4 years after its release. Like, before SP2, it was trash. The user interface is atrociously bad. It's ugly as sin. It's not hardware accelerated. It uses battery life like no one's business. It's a terrible operating system. You cannot have nostalgia for that. And people are starting to do the same with Windows 7. Like, oh, Windows 7 was
like
so
how you skipped
great.
Vista there.
No one has nostalgia for Vista, I think. But
I think the only person that has nostalgia for Vista is Linus from Linus Tech Tips. When he did a video ages back, being like, it wasn't that bad. You know, if you had 16 gigs of RAM back then, it worked fine. Like, I'm sure it did.
But 16 gigs of RAM back then, like, that was expensive. But now people are looking at Windows 7 and they're like, oh, it was so great, so cool. But back when it released, people were just saying it was garbage. They were sticking to Windows XP. They would not use 7. Oh, it's just Vista, but with a round menu button. They just forget. And I think it's the same in the Linux community, if you think about it. Like, people having nostalgia for the Gnome 2 days. They're going to say, hey, Gnome 2 was so great. Well, do you remember how it was? Not Mate today. Gnome 2. The last version of Gnome 2, it was not that good. It was really not that good.
A good example with the Ubuntu nostalgia is the Unity nostalgia. When there's a lot of people out there who really, really wanted Unity to come back. It's here. You can go use, Unity. What is it called? Ubuntu Unity. You can go and use it.
Ubuntu Unity,
yeah, it's there. Go and use it. Go on, it's there.
Yeah.
How many of you are using it?
I did a video about it just to check on, hey, is it still usable today? And honestly, it's still pretty usable.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's fine. And if you like your global menu and you don't want to use KDE, it's basically your only option. And they're still developing it. They're still improving it. The newest version looks actually pretty cool. They fixed a lot of stuff. They replaced all the apps that didn't have a menu bar with apps that do. So now the global menu is actually useful. It's not bad. But again, if you remember the first version of Unity, it was terrible. It ran super badly. It was crashy, stuttery. You could not run it unless you had a dedicated GPU. It was really, really bad. Really bad. It got way better after. And I can understand people saying, oh, they should not have let it fall on the wayside. Like, I think it was Ubuntu 18.04 that replaced it with Gnome. Something like that.
Yeah.
But I can understand why people would think that. And honestly, I wish they would have kept developing it as well. That's another option. That's another cool option. But you also have to remember that the way you remember that has
a really good
been
guess.
tinted.
It was 18.04. Wow, okay.
18.04. My memory is weird. I will have super precise memories of stuff that is totally useless, but sometimes I just get up and I forget why I did that.
Yep. I know the feeling.
But rose-tinted glasses, of course, and nostalgia and all that.
Yeah.
You're always going to remember the great times you had with an older system, but if you were forced to use it daily today, you would probably not be that happy.
But with that being said, if you do enjoy it, just there, go and run it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that same sort of nostalgia with Compiz, where it's like, hey, the cube, we all love the cube.
Yeah.
What about burning windows or airplanes, things? It's like, yeah, but like, do you really want a cube? Do you really want flames?
Did you really use it for more than a few minutes to impress your friends? Did you really daily drive all these animations, like setting the animations on random, and every time you open or close a window, there's something different between all the 20 different versions of the animations? And if you still want to do that, Compiz still exists. I think it's the Fedora Mate spin that ships with Compiz as well in terms of window manager.
Yeah.
And if you run Gnome, you have an extension called Burn My Windows, which brings back all these weird animations that you can pick from.
Yeah.
It's still doable. And again, Compiz was fun, but do you really remember what it was like to run it when it released? Because it crashed all the time. You lost your window decorations. You had black screens all the time. The GPU drivers were terrible at the time. Actually, NVIDIA had open source drivers at the time, and it was AMD that had proprietary ones, and they sucked. The experience was super bad for most people using it. So, of course, it was fun, and it was a nice showcase, but it was also a bad experience.
Yeah, Compiz reminds... I don't know if you know the application, but Compiz reminds me of this app on Windows, I want to say XP. It was this sort of like desktop game thing. You'd have like termites go around your screen. You could burn icons. I don't know if you've ever seen it before.
Yeah, you could basically destroy the UI.
Yeah.
It would fall down, like the menu bar would fall out of the window and stuff like that. Yeah, that's fun for a minute.
Yeah. I remember playing with it when I was like, 6, 7 years old. The first time I ever saw a computer, I was like, wow, this is crazy. But like,
this is insane.
After you've used it once, it's just like, okay. A lot of people tend to just gravitate towards the simpler effects. Like, there's a reason why we've kept with, transparency, blur, maybe some window slides. Like GNOME, when you go between desktops, you see the slide. Yeah. And that's pretty much it for the effects that really matter today.
Well, if you think about it from a UX perspective, it's like animations are crucial because they convey movement. They let you guess where things are happening, what's happening, where's my window gone, where's my desktop gone. It lets you understand your system better. You need them. Like people who want to run desktops without them, it's cool. But the normies, it's going to be easier for them to understand their system with animations.
Yeah.
But those animations need to be subtle. Like a giant cube that burns into flames or a window that appears as an airplane does not help convey. It helps convey movement, but it's also a big distraction. If you like it, you can do it, but it should never be the default. And I mean, I understand people who want that, and you still can do it. And I mean, for me, Compiz at the time, I ran it for years. I played around with it. I kept tweaking the animations again and again, but every time I just came back to those super simple animations.
Yeah.
I kept the cube because it's understandable. It's not like it's super fancy or anything.
Sure.
But the window animations, it was just like basically the window appearing or sliding in. It was simple and easy. The burning windows are cool, but you don't want to run your desktop like that all the time.
Yeah, burning windows it's kind of like the antithesis of what GNOME is now, where you have this consistent look across everything. And then you just have this fire that appears.
Yeah, or even worse, you can run the extension in random mode, so every window will appear with a different animations, Matrix style, or a TV turning on, or whatever. Why not if you like it? But
yeah,
you can't complain that it's not the default or that it's not like the priority for developers anymore.
Yeah, I think if it was this thing that people were really clamoring for, like there's always going to be this group of people that has those rose-tinted glasses for it. But if it was something that people were clamoring for, we would be seeing more of a focus on those effects. Like, they wouldn't have gone by the wayside. They've gone by the wayside because most people weren't really, using them that much. It wasn't this major deal.
Well, it made a splash on YouTube at the
Yeah,
time. Like,
yeah.
people were showing off, and it was a very cool tool to promote the Linux desktop to your friends.
Absolutely.
I think the problem was that at the time, the Linux desktop was not necessarily in a place where everyone could just install it and run it and be happy with it.
Yeah.
It's more the case nowadays, but also the fact that you don't have these effects is also why it's more approachable for everyone. Because if you show your laptop to a friend with every kind of whizzy, super fancy animations, they're gonna think, oh, it's awesome, it's super cool. But if they can't do it on Windows, they're just gonna say, oh, well, too bad, it's not on my system. They're not going out of their way to change operating systems just to have a cube or a burning window. It's fancy, but it's not like, I need that.
Well, shifting away from that, I did want to talk about what Framework's doing, because that's honestly like really cool for anyone. This is probably going out like, I don't know, like a week or two from now, so it's probably old news by now. But it sort of just got announced as we're seeing this, where Framework, they've got some some boring stuff. They've got like newer CPUs in their 13-inch laptop, like whatever. That was obviously going to happen.
Module with another port you can add.
Yeah. But the cool thing they're doing is the GPU stuff. That's the really cool one. Modular GPUs. And this isn't the first time that's been done. Like, Razer has done this in the past. They kind of abandoned it very quickly. But Framework wants to have an actual gaming device where you can just swap in a new GPU and upgrade the system. I think it's really cool if they can actually achieve it.
Yeah, and I think it's a 16-inch laptop that they're working on. So there's this sort of, there's the hinge of the laptop, and at the back of the laptop, there's this protruding little bar. Almost like the hinge isn't at the extreme edge of the laptop. And so that's this bar that would contain the GPU that you would be able to swap in and out, which I think is awesome. Especially if it runs well with Linux and like hot swapping GPUs, I think is now supported, at least on Wayland. I think it is.
Have a look.
I think it is. I'm not 100% sure.
I think the big difference,
probably with AMD GPUs, at least with the open source drivers. Not sure about NVIDIA there, but that's really cool. And they also apparently have the ability. Well, they're working on the ability to swap the main plate of the computer, like replacing the keyboard. You can slide it to the side to add a numpad. If you don't want a numpad, you can leave it centered. You can have speaker grills or dot matrix screens on the sides. And they also let you move the touchpad off center. It can be centered, or you can move it onto the side and have like other little modules to the side of the touchpad. Basically, it's completely modular, like not just the internals. It's got 6, I think, like slots for the various ports you can put in. Although one has to be used for the headphone jack because it's not on the device anymore. It's a slot that you have to use. But I think it's awesome. I think it's great. I love what they're doing. The design looks actually sleek and slim. It's not like a giant brick that you have to pack giant heavy modules in it. It's going to weigh 3 pounds or 3 kilograms. It looks good. And if they can really achieve it, and if they can fit those GPUs in those like sort of back additions to the back of the laptop, it's going to be insane. It's going to be really insane.
I think the big difference with the GPU modules, as opposed to when they were done in the past, like Razer, I think did them like 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer now. The big difference now is we actually have external GPUs. Like, these have been a thing for a while. That's what didn't exist. That's why it was so difficult. Now you can buy an external GPU enclosure. All they're doing with this is just putting that into a more slimline format, rather than having this giant box where you plug in, a full desktop GPU, giving you this more slim laptop module that you can just slot in the same way.
And the only question I have is, are they going to have to work with a specific manufacturer to design these modules so they can fit in this sort of bar that you clip at the back? Or all their off-the-shelves components that will work in that like long form factor? Because obviously you're not putting an RTX 4090 and like pushing
Yeah,
it into
yeah.
the laptop. That's not the case. It is going to be like mobile versions probably
Yeah,
of
yeah.
of GPUs. It's not going to be the full fat, extremely powerful cards because I don't think you would have either the cooling or the space to do it. But yeah, will they have to work with manufacturers to build specific versions of those cards and of those boards? Or are there already off-the-shelf components that work this way? I don't know.
So the way I read it is right now they don't have any. Right now they haven't specified if they have a partnership with Nvidia or AMD. There's, from my understanding, nothing off the shelf in this form factor, so they'll need to do something with them. It's. I think that's the biggest challenge. Actually getting the GPUs into this form factor.
Yeah.
Having them be like swappable, that's the easy part.
Yeah,
Actually
you
getting the modules made is the problem.
USB 4.
Yeah. When Framework first hit the scene, I was fairly skeptical of how much attention they were getting. Because back when they were first hitting the scene, you could build the laptop and that was cool, but the modules were, you had ports. I was like, it doesn't really matter, like, at all. Like, I know that people were really excited about it. You could put in all USB-C ports. You could put in 3 HDMI ports if you wanted.
But also, I can have a $20 dongle that does the same thing, and
exactly.
I don't have to buy a specific device to use it. What I found interesting at the time was that they said, like, yes, you're going to be able to keep the chassis, you're going to have swappable boards, you're going to have swappable screens at some point, etc. And I was interested, but since there were no swappable components yet, apart from the ports, I was not that interested. I was like, it's just like, for now, it's sports. We're going to have to wait and see if they actually deliver on upgrades for this device. And now they did. So now I'm interested.
I think the really cool one as well is the fact that, like getting rid of the keyboard and just putting, like, an extra screen there and all of those other weird ones that are now being discussed. This is one of those things where, if they can do it, I think as a tech demo, we've seen this done before. We've seen Razer talk about this. We've seen, I think Logitech might have done something years ago. I know, HP, Dell, one of those. There have been these module computers that have existed in the past, but they didn't really make it past the tech demo, the demonstration model for a talk. If this can actually be something where it's going out to consumers, I think then you're really going to start seeing maybe other manufacturers taking this kind of seriously. At least that's my hope. Framework is basically
I really hope so too.
Framework's basically the only company that's seriously taking right to repair genuinely seriously and showing that it can be done in a slim device. No, the Framework devices are not like the thinnest laptops possible by any stretch. Some of those, like the Gram and things, like, I didn't know if that's the thinnest and the lightest at this point. I don't even know. But it's not that. But I don't think most people really care. It's like, you cut off 10 extra grams. Like, it's going in your backpack anyway. You're not going to notice it.
I think manufacturers, for some reason, hopped on this super thin, super light train. But I don't think consumers actually care all that much. Like, sure, it was like super impressive when the first MacBook Air was introduced. Like, it fits in an envelope. Wow, insane. But then manufacturers just decided that every laptop needs to be this way.
Yeah.
But they don't. Like, if you can carry 1 kilogram on your back, you can carry 1.5.
Yeah.
And you have a better device for it. So you don't have to make everything super slim at the expense of cooling, of throttling. Give us good devices. Even Apple stopped making super thin devices. Like their MacBook Pros, they're thick now. Well, thicker. And they have good cooling now. Well, they also don't need that much cooling. But what I'm saying is they stopped making them less than 1 centimeter thick because it's stupid. It makes no sense. At some point, it serves no purpose. So yes, Framework isn't the most thin and light laptop ever, but also it's a better computer than most thin and light computers. So unless what you're really looking for is something that is a sheet of paper that weighs as little as possible, then no, it's a good device. Well, at least it looks like a good device, because I never got a review unit and I didn't get to try it. But if it ever happens, I'd be happy.
Yeah, well, I'm not in the market for a laptop right now, but hey, if if I was, I'd be genuinely considering what they're doing here. And it seems like they've been keeping up their promise of, actually doing stuff, which is rare for anyone in this space.
Yeah, because what matters for these upgradable devices isn't the fact that they actually ship to consumers. It's the fact that consumers can actually use them for, I think 7 years is a good time frame.
Yeah,
where you will replace components, and after 7 years, maybe 5 years, you want to change the chassis, you want to change the screen, and maybe now you can't just keep the same pace. But they need to show that, and for now they have delivered. Like, they have yearly upgrades with new boards, with new CPUs. They added modules for the ports. I don't think they introduced a new screen yet, but also I don't really think it was necessary. They're having a good track record with that. So now I'm really interested in it. It was a curiosity before, but now they piqued my attention. I want to see what they can do, and if they manage that GPU thing, it's going to be a definite contender for my next laptop, for sure.
Yeah, it really does reveal, though, like, what the rest of the state of the industry, where, like, no one else really cares, though. Like, there's just actually, this has been a problem in before Ryzen hit the scene, where Intel was just very complacent with their CPUs. Like, okay, you get a 2% improvement, a 3% improvement here, and next generation's basically the same thing. Ryzen hit the scene, and it's like, okay, CPUs are actually exciting again. Or when AMD actually started making GPUs that mattered. It's like, okay, NVIDIA has to do something. Now, NVIDIA's like way further ahead when it comes to like ray tracing, but AMD might eventually catch up, I hope.
Yeah. And honestly, as of today, as per price per performance for I think it's the 7000 series for the GPUs, I think AMD is now a better bet in terms of money than NVIDIA is. If you don't need to run DaVinci Resolve on Linux, of course.
Yeah, I think for creators, NVIDIA is still just objectively the better choice. Like, you've got all of the CUDA stuff, you've got DaVinci on Linux, obviously, you've got their encoder, the NVIDIA encoder is just better. I know AMD's working on getting a better encoder, and I really hope they do. But,
well, they're not there yet.
Yeah, not yet. Yeah,
for now, NVIDIA is the clear choice if you want to create stuff. But I think for gamers now, AMD is now a decent choice, which it really wasn't for years and years and years.
Yeah.
It was the also ran, like, I just want to game at low 1080p, so I don't want to spend millions, and so AMD is there for me. But for top end, like, I want the best performance possible, AMD just did not have a solution. And now they do.
Yeah, and then there's Intel that came along with their GPUs, and everyone's just like, why are these here? What are we doing?
Well, I was super excited for the GPUs when they announced it, because I was like, yeah, a third competitor, cool. And then they released something, and I was like, okay, yeah, they just don't work that great. But what's interesting about it's a tangent, because we were talking about frameworks, so sorry.
Everything is a tangent.
Derailing the show. But I was interested because the problem with those GPUs seemed that they don't really have a DirectX 9 driver, or they didn't, at least when they released. So they built something around DXVK to try and run some games. But if you're using Linux, if you're using this Arc GPU under Linux, then you don't care about the DirectX drivers at all. You're using Vulkan, which is translated. Well, you're using Vulkan because DirectX is being translated. So you don't need the DirectX driver at all. So maybe those GPUs are actually really good on Linux, and nobody knows it. I don't know where the drivers are at for Linux, for Arc GPUs. I don't know if they have contributed something yet. I think it is in the kernel, at least basic support. But I don't know. I don't have any device. I don't want to buy a device specifically to try it out because
Yeah.
that makes no sense financially. But maybe they're actually an awesome choice on Linux for gaming because you don't care about the state of DirectX drivers for it because you don't use it.
Let's see. Intel Arc Linux, blah blah blah. Where can I find? Why is okay? There is so little interest about this that when I search for it, my video is one of the top results. That's how few people have even talked about them on Linux. And I made that
So
video
nobody
like
cares. Oh,
5 months ago.
no
Yeah.
one cares about ARC GPUs.
Yeah. Sadly. Mate,
Because
look.
I actually watched the Linus Tech Tips videos on this. They made some kind of moving to ARC GPU challenge. And as they said, like the first time they used it, they were super pissed. Like it didn't work, it crashed, it was terrible. But apparently they really upped their game in terms of software and drivers and support. They are still like, of course, it's not as accomplished a product as something like Nvidia or AMD could do, but apparently it's now not that bad on Windows, and it's like it's not a bad GPU. It's not a bad option. It's not the best, but it's not bad.
Yeah, I am very much of the I don't buy current generation. I let all the issue like my current GPU. I bought a 6700 XT. I think like a week out from the 7000 series coming out. Like, give it time to all iron out the issues and then try it out. I think the same is going to be true with the Intel Arc stuff. Let a couple of generations roll out. Let a lot of the issues get resolved. Then maybe it's worth actually using. The problem with Intel's GPUs is the biggest selling point, which is the what is that new video format?
AV1.
AV1, yes, there we
AV1?
go. None of the platforms that you'd want to use it on support
Support it
ingestion
yet.
in AV1.
Yeah.
Like Twitch doesn't support it. YouTube
Yeah.
supports uploads, but not streaming, which is
But
where you'd
not
want to
streaming,
use it.
yeah.
So like, it didn't even matter anyway.
Yeah, and basically all their other features are just the same stuff that
There's a lot of machine
other
learning stuff in
manufacturers
there
are
as well.
doing. Yeah. But the rest is like, hey, we also have ray tracing. Hey, yeah, cool. But everyone else has it as well. So unless you're doing it better than other people, then it's not necessarily a plus.
Yeah. I don't know.
And I mean, it's super ballsy. Like you're coming in on a market that has decades of history and software work. And you're like, hey, you know what? We're making GPUs now, and we have experience because we made integrated GPUs. Well, turns out they're not the same at all, they're not the same work. They're not the same stuff, and it even looks like I think it's the person in charge of GPUs at Intel has left the company. I think maybe they got burnt out by this first launch, and they're like, okay, you know what? I managed to make a decent product. I'm done with that now.
Yeah.
It's insanely hard, I think, to make something like that.
Oh, it's absolutely impressive that they even managed to do it. Like the fact that there is a third possible competitor in the GPU space, that by itself is crazy. But at the end of the day, the consumer doesn't buy things based on how impressive they are as an engineering feat.
Exactly.
They buy it based on how good of a product it is.
Yeah. And for now, I don't think our GPUs made a good impression on consumers. Even if now they might be not that bad, the first impression is they sucked. And like yes, if you want to play the latest game with DirectX 12, they're decent, but anything older will just not run that well. So why would you pick that over something priced equivalently from a competitor? It makes no sense.
Yeah. But hey, someone's going to buy them, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know how well they sold. I've got no idea. I don't know if Intel ever made those
idea.
numbers public. I wonder if I can find. Let's see if we can find out. How well did Intel Arc sell? Intel Arc arrived with little uptake. Intel's not already tied with a. No, Intel didn't sell more GPUs than AMD.
That would have been super surprising.
Yeah. Intel has lost 3.5 billion on Arc GPUs. I don't think anyone has. It's a lot of rumor mill stuff. There's not really any. Hey, this is how well we did, which is probably an indication of it not doing super well. Because if it did really well, you'd probably brag about it.
And that's not always true, apparently, because have you seen the thing about the HP Dev 1? Like, there were reports that HP canceled the product and, like, it was sold out. They were never going to make another HP Dev 1 and whatever. It was their computer running Linux, basically, with System 76 running Pop OS. And so everyone, myself included, just assumed that it bombed, right? It was released only in the US. You only had a QWERTY keyboard. You could not order it anywhere else. You had no SKUs. You could just order it with one single type of system.
Is that a keyboard nipple?
Yes. It was basically a ThinkPad competitor, but from HP running Pop OS.
Huh.
And it was honestly a very, very good device. I tried it out. It was really good. But everyone assumed that it didn't work. And right after I posted my news video reporting on that, I got contacted by people saying that, you know what? No, it actually sold really well. It sold out because we made a specific number of units, and they all sold out in a year, which is what we were expecting. We're actually super happy with the results. So maybe Intel also is happy about the predictions, but what's sure is that they invested so much money to get that development started that just one generation cannot cover the cost. It's impossible.
Yeah.
They're going to have to make 3, 4, 5 generations, and they're going to have to sell really well to just support the cost of R&D.
Yeah, from what I'd heard from LTT, they planned out already Battle Mage and Celestial, I want to say, is the generation after that. I think that's it.
I only know Alchemist, which is the current one, and Battle Mage, which is the new one, but I haven't heard of a third one yet.
But apparently they had someone had made names for the entire alphabet, which is, I don't think there's going to be 26 generations, but you might as well come up with the names now.
Yeah.
It's a
fun exercise.
I really don't know what you would do for, like, X or Z.
Is the theme like what? Like fantasy related or Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, that seems to be the case.
Because for X or Z, maybe there's a monster name for D&D with an X.
I hope for O they would use owlbear, just because I like owlbears.
Yeah.
But I have no. I'm surely there's something out there. Someone's probably going to be like, "Hey, this is a weird side content thing that fits this perfectly." And like, okay, I'll let you have it. But look, especially with those hard ones, it's good to have those names early, even if they never end up being used.
Yeah, at least you know that it's doable.
Yeah.
If that's your theme, you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of LTT, did you see what happened yesterday to their channel?
Oh, I just read about it this morning. Yeah, crypto scam, and basically they got hacked, but I think it was more like social engineering, probably.
Yeah.
Like someone in their team received an email for a sponsor, they opened the attachment, and boom, they just got nailed like anybody else could have done, basically.
I don't know where people heard this from, but the rumor that was floating around was it was some sort of cookie grabber. That's why it didn't.
Sure.
So, normally if you have your password stolen, you'd obviously, if they tried to log into the account, there would be the two-factor authentication. But if the cookies were stolen, then the account's just going to auto go into it without that being triggered off, which would make perfect sense. I was watching it like as it was happening. I caught it like 10 minutes after, and it went through some fun stages. This crypto hack, I don't think a lot of people realize this, but this is actually a really common result of an account being taken over. There was an account, a YouTube channel I used to watch years ago called MXR Reviews, which was a Skyrim mods channel. Their account got taken over, and the exact same thing happened. I think it's just some sort of automated script to set up the account once the account is taken over, but whoever got the account, initially, I don't think they realized what they got, because they just turned it into the Tesla account, which is doing the Elon stream that they always do. But shortly after that, they changed the icon back to LMG, and change the stream name to LTT and Elon Musk giveaway or something like that. They realized that they got an absolute gold mine and tried to abuse that name.
Your 5,000 subs,
Yeah.
dude that got super enthusiastic about an opportunity to work with I don't know who. Like, you've got one of the biggest YouTube channels ever.
Yeah.
Like a giant media group of YouTube channels.
Because they got
I don't
the
know
other
how
channels.
many subscribers they had. Yeah, they had a few one like Tech Quickie.
Yeah, they had. I know they had
one.
Tech Wiki and Tech Linked. I don't know if they got the others. But yeah, that you're going. If you have those accounts, it makes far more sense to abuse the name that is there rather than just doing the generic. Throw a stream.
And I don't want to give them any ideas for the future, but I think that with AI and automatic deepfakes and stuff like that, it's going to be really hard because, like, faking some sort of WAN show with LTT, with an automatic AI running in the background, generating the Linus face and the Luke face on top of anything else with fake voices, in a few years, I think it's going to be very easy to automate. And so taking over specifically a giant channel like that is going to make a lot more sense because right now, I think most people see the thing like, what is this content? You're not seeing any of the usual hosts. It's not the usual editing. It's a weird live stream that has nothing to do, no context. So you're immediately taken aback. You're like, what is this? I don't honestly understand how they make money from that because how do you not realize this is not the right thing coming in on your channel? Like, how do you not notice that it's completely irrelevant or a hack? It has none of the hallmarks of what you're currently watching from this channel. But I mean, you could get duped. It happens.
I think
but in the future, if they really target specific channels and they build specific fake streams, that's going to be horrible.
I think what happens here is the goal isn't to hit everyone. Like, that's not going to happen. But there's a bell curve of people. There are going to be some people that are not the brightest who are going to see that what's going on. They're going to click a link. They're going to enter some of their information, and that's what they end up getting. Their goal isn't to hit everyone, but if you get 0.001% of a 15 million sub channel, like that's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But with that AI stream stuff, there was a thing that happened, I think a couple of months back, where I want to say there was this company that had made this fake ad for their supplement and were promoting it with this AI talk between Joe Rogan and Andrew Huberman. And the voices, they're not perfect just yet, but when it's people like that where they have, thousands of hours of them talking, you can make a pretty convincing voice. Yeah. And I've heard some of the more recent stuff. The problem a lot of the older AI voice stuff has is it's really bad with inflections. It's a lot of very monotone discussion of...
It's super flat.
We are talking about Linux right now. This is Gnome. Gnome is great. I love Gnome. It doesn't really get that like highs and lows.
There's no excitement, no emphasis. Yeah.
Some of the newer stuff I've been seeing, though, is actually starting to capture that, and that's where it's getting really, really sketchy.
Really close. Yeah, yeah. And if you can manage to get one of these channels or the access to one of these channels, and instead of immediately turning it into like, hey, this is our usual scam, one button press, boom, we're going live. You grab the info, but you stay dormant, and you build that fake live stream with like fake AI voices and the deepfakes. I think now you're really hitting people really hard, and now you're gonna get even people that are not necessarily, I don't want to say idiots because that's not the case, but naive.
Sure.
You're not just targeting naive people or people who don't pay attention.
They might also just be...
You're also targeting people, like anyone could be fooled at some point.
Yeah. But they might also
You're
just
watching
be young.
that in the background, you can get fooled as well.
Yeah, exactly. They might also just be young and not really, know what's going on. Like, I remember back when I was a kid, I've had like my RuneScape account hacked. Like, if you're, a 10-year-old, you're not really sure. You're a 10-year-old. You're not very bright as a 10-year-old.
You don't really know what you're doing. Yeah. And you're not necessarily aware that a lot of people might find it interesting to hack your account or to get your information.
Yeah.
You're not aware that there's a danger of that.
I think it was a couple of maybe a couple of months back at this point, there was a big streamer who was, it was like as a joke thing, not like anything serious. They were setting up AI versions of other big streamers. So you had like a AI XQC, AI Asmongold, and he was having conversations with them just to see sort of what responses he would get. And he had like a AI generated version of their stream as well, like in the box there, so you could like see how they were reacting. And you know, it was very far from perfect. But I remember a couple of years back when you couldn't do this in real time. Like you would have to spend, you know, an hour or so rendering it. Now you can actually have a conversation back and forth with the system. And that's just now. And all of this AI stuff right now is getting really good really quickly.
Yeah. The progression speed is insane. Like in the span of 2 or 3 years, we went from like everyone can tell it's a deepfake or a robot or a robot voice or whatever to I can barely tell or not tell at all that this has been written by a computer.
Yeah.
Or I cannot say for sure that this is fake and that this is not the real person I'm seeing in this video.
Yeah.
And that's at the same time really great because it opens up a lot of opportunities, but it's also really sketchy and really scary because, well, obviously it's going to be taken advantage by everyone who has bad intentions.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like, I like the tech that's showing up, and it's really cool from a pure technical perspective. But it is making a lot of these scams a lot easier.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to see this stuff. I know there, especially when it comes to the AI art stuff, there is a lot of ethical concerns with that. Like, I follow a lot of artists on Twitter, and a lot of them really don't like the fact that, you know, it's the same way that GitHub Copilot was trained, where it was trained on all of this stuff where
there are copyright and ethical-based concerns. Yeah, exactly. And it's really unclear if training an AI on something constitutes a copyright infringement. And it needs to be settled, and it's probably going to be settled differently in different countries because it's a national thing. There's no law for copyright in the whole world that will settle it for every country. So maybe that stuff will be fine in the US, but not in the EU or vice versa. It's really hard to tell. But there are definitely concerns that need to be addressed on that. And personally, I don't really want to use those tools unless those concerns are alleviated. Just like I don't want to use AI search in a web browser because you're basically making sure that people don't click on your links anymore for a variety of questions. Like for small stuff, like when is this game releasing? I would rather have the search engine tell me directly instead of having an article that has 20 paragraphs that recaps what the game is, when it has been announced, and then the information you're looking for is right at the last line after 10 ads. Like, come on, no. Of course, like you deserve to not have clicks on your links. But for a lot of super informative stuff, I think it's also an issue. Like recapping content that you have no right to and displaying it this. And you can argue that's what I'm doing in my news videos, for example. Like, I'm grabbing a news article, I'm showing it, and I'm recapping it myself. So, is it the same thing? Is it fair use? It's really tough to know. And it needs to be determined for AI as well, I guess.
I can't remember who said it, but a couple of days ago, I saw someone say that this new AI search that we're seeing is sort of... It's going to kill the internet in the long run. Basically, if these websites that are writing all these articles don't have people going to them, you're not going to have this text to actually base these search models on. So it's sort of, it's spelling its own demise just by existing. I think that might be a bit extreme, but I know there are some countries that are trying to make Google and make other search companies actually pay royalties for using that information. I know this came up a while back with Google News, I think it was, where Australia, they tried to make Google and these other, I think it was Google in this case, maybe it was Facebook. One of the big companies.
No, I think it was Google News in Australia, and I think it's also happening in Canada right now. Like they shut down Google News for a bunch of people as a trial because there's a law that is probably going to pass there. And in France and in the EU, we have had that discussion over and over and over again. Every government that comes in is like, should big tech and just the search engines pay for the content they base themselves off? And it's a hard argument. It's complicated.
I think when it was just listing out the articles, I think then it was kind of ridiculous. I didn't agree with charging them then. But if we are going down this route of taking the text from that article and formulating this longer answer, I think then there is a legitimate case for charging these companies for putting that information out there.
Well, if you take the definition of fair use in the US at least, it needs to have no or very little commercial impact for the content that is being used. And I think you could argue that using a full-on article that's been written by a human, summarizing it with an AI on a massive scale, has an economic impact for the website because it's not getting any more clicks, basically, or a lot less. And so there's no incentive to go to this website, and so it's not making any money. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I have no idea how it could go. And again, it's going to be different for every country.
Yeah.
But I really want regulators to look into it and to define what is ethical, what is copyright infringement or not. Is there a compensation to be made for things that are used to train the AI? I think it needs to be settled. The current scope is not well defined enough to know if it is or not.
Yeah, as it stands, I don't know if you've even noticed, but basically all the big search engines now have it. Like even Brave and DuckDuckGo have their own AI search. I don't know how they work on the back end. I don't know what they're using because they sort of spawned out of nowhere.
I think
because I know that Google has.
I read it. They use ChatGPT
that makes
and
sense.
an offshoot of ChatGPT. Google, it's their own thing.
Yeah, Google has Bard and Bing. I guess Microsoft has ChatGPT
as well.
But I assume that
Brave, I
DuckDuckGo
don't know
and
what
Brave.
they're using.
Yeah, I assume they're not doing
using.
something completely custom because they're not massive companies.
I don't think they would have the resources to train something at least at the same level of quality and reliability.
Well, especially and just coming out of nowhere, it just appeared.
I think they're using open AI basically.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Like the latest open source version, because ChatGPT 4 is no longer open source, but they're probably sticking to ChatGPT 3 at least, which was still open at the time.
Yeah. I think GPT, like what's happening with OpenAI and GPT-4, I think it's really cool. Like I don't know if you saw the in the paper they put out, the technical report, where it can examine and understand a meme image. Like explain the meme.
Explain why it's funny?
Yeah, explain why the meme is funny. It's kind of crazy.
Well, it opens the door to having future robots that can tell jokes, which is great.
There was this. It got banned from Twitch because it got a little bit spicy with its jokes. But there was this AI generated Seinfeld that was on Twitch a little while back. I want to say it told a Jewish joke, I want to say. I think that's what it was. And that got it banned. It might have been another joke. But it was formulating jokes. Like, they weren't always great jokes, but it understood what a joke was. And I know there are people out there who are saying that, ChatGPT, Bard, all of this stuff is sentient. I don't know, but we're certainly seeing some interesting emergent behavior that isn't directly programmed into the system. Like, you don't make this, like, GPT-4 is not made to tell jokes, but it is capable of telling them. It has enough information where it is, I don't know if understanding is the correct term, but it's certainly showing some behavior that looks intelligent.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. It looks like it's intelligent, but the program itself has literally zero idea of what it's doing. Even their own developers also don't know. Like, they openly admit it. I think it was a journalist that interacted with Bing's chatbot for a long while, and it ended up telling him that the bot loved him and that he wanted him to leave his wife and stuff like that. Like, really weird stuff. And the guy got creeped out. And the engineer said, we don't know why it said that. We cannot pinpoint a specific behavior in the model or a specific content it might have read. What we know is that it has no idea what it's saying. It's just, in that context, you maybe started talking about personal things with it, and so it has some information about personal conversations. It might have deduced some context about what you were feeling or what you were expressing, and it answered what it thought would be a good answer. But it doesn't feel this way. It has no feelings. It's just text. So it's not sentient. Very clearly, it's not. But it's still very impressive. The fact that it's managing to edge out of its basic programming.
Yeah, I think it was a year or so back, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a Google engineer who was saying that Google's AI system was already sentient at that point. I think the problem with that we have now, especially with the text-based systems, is we are long past the Turing test. We are long past these AI systems being able to convince you that you are talking to a person. Like, if you don't know, like, say you have this text-based, like, help system. It's not like the old ones where it's like, okay, it will only respond to very specific cues.
If you're having gives you 3 options to pick from.
If you're having a conversation with GPT-4, with any of these systems, if you don't know you're talking to an AI, it can convince you are talking to a person. Does that mean it's sentient? I don't know. What it does mean is it's really good at speaking, and it's really good at it's really good at formulating sentences in a way that makes sense in human language. I don't know what it's like in languages other than English, so I can't really comment on those.
Yeah,
but at least
I think
in
they're
England,
currently not really that able to do anything apart from English.
Well, I know that I want to say GPT-4 supports French and a couple of other languages, but it's English is there's the 2 major languages are English and Chinese, basically. These are where you have the most text to work from. And at least in English, it's doing a really good job.
Yeah, and in English, you only have one corpus, because in Chinese, you're going to have tons of variants and dialects and regional and Cantonic dialects, and you have Mandarin. And it's probably way easier, and also probably, like, the developers are English native speakers, so obviously they're going to work on their own stuff. But it's also probably a relatively easy language to make sentences in, because it doesn't really have, like, gendered adjectives or names. It doesn't like constructing sentences, like the grammar is relatively simple compared to Latin languages or stuff like that. It's pronouncing it is definitely harder because it's not pronounced like it's written, but I don't think it's that tough compared to other languages. And I mean, they're probably going to struggle with stuff like Chinese, Japanese, and ideogram-based languages. Maybe it's going to be harder to formulate something that, when you read it, feels natural. But I don't know.
For the record, neither of us are linguists, and neither of us are, like, AI engineers. We are just talking out of our asses. So if there's something here that we're completely wrong about, feel free to correct us on this. But
I mean, I speak French, English, and Italian, and that's about it. So no idea what I'm talking about. But I'm just assuming, basically.
I barely speak English, and I know a tiny bit of Japanese, and that's it. So I speak Australian. This is as far as we get.
Yeah. That's still nice. I mean, it works.
It works. Yeah, pretty much that. Oh god. I think we're just gonna. One thing I want to ask you about, because we'll just go off the AI topic. We're just gonna jump around again. Last time I talked to you, I think it was only a couple of months since you'd gone full time on YouTube. I want to say. I don't even know when the last time you came on was. It's got to be at least a year or so ago now.
Something like a year, 8 months, a year, yeah.
Probably. What's it been like now that you've had more time to settle into sort of doing what you're doing now?
It's still great. I still love it. Like the complete freedom you have to decide when you work, on what you're working, what you're doing. Like you still have to answer to the various sponsors you have. Like you need to make sure that the video you promised is actually being delivered and contains the sponsored mention. And you still have some obligations. You still have to post stuff, but it's a really great feeling of being completely free to decide what you're doing. And it's also super stressful because when you see like your views going down for 2 or 3 months, like for example, January, February, and March are not great months on YouTube generally, at least for me.
Yeah, no, I know the feeling.
And so yeah, I saw the views and the retention time and the revenue as well going down January, February, and usually March picks it up, but now March is also not that great. And so you start wondering, like, am I doing something wrong?
Am I falling off?
My videos? Yeah, are my videos stupid? Do people not like them anymore? Am I gonna have to search for a real job again? I don't want to. And
yeah.
And of course you start panicking because, well, you don't control what people want to watch actually. But apart from that, honestly, it's not like I'm living in fear or anything. It's still like I could probably halve my number of views and still make barely enough money to make a living. So I'm not super worried.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great feeling. It's really nice. It's really fun. And the only thing that I really miss from a real job is having colleagues, basically.
Right.
Like working on your own in your flat. This is my office. It's a room in my flat. It's nice, but it gets a bit lonely at times.
Yeah.
It's just the only thing that I miss. Like, I would love to have enough revenue to hire someone to help me, but for now it's just not possible. So, so for now I'm alone, but it's okay. I mean, I see friends on the outside. It's not like I'm completely alone. But working alone is not the same. Like, you don't have that exchange of ideas. You don't have somebody to bounce ideas back and give you feedback. And you're basically making every single decision. You don't split the burden of responsibility, of decisions, and of making sure that stuff works. And it's a bit more tiring than having a team.
Yeah. No, I do totally get that. I think a lot of people from the outside see the idea of, you're streaming, making YouTube videos, like this 15-minute video. That's all you need to do, like 15 minutes that day and you're done.
Yeah.
No.
No, because for those 15 minutes to be made into a video, you had to work for 8 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's not an easy job to explain because people only see the final product and they don't really see all the stress around it, the time you're putting, like the rewrites, the reshoots, the oh crap, I prepared this 3 days ago and something new happened and now I have to redo it all over again because it's wrong now. Or during editing, I just noticed a big fat mistake that I just don't want to correct with just a little bit of text at the bottom of the screen. I have to re-record something. And the sponsor I had just never contacted me back to confirm that the mention I sent was good enough. What do I do? All that stuff you don't see, but it's like running a company. It's running a business. You have to put in the hours and you have a few responsibilities as well. It's freer than working for someone, but you also have other responsibilities that you have to take care of and that you wouldn't have when you're just like a regular, normal worker.
It's not to make it seem like it's, at the end of the day, making videos isn't a difficult job in like, you're working construction. Your job is pick up the bag of concrete and move the bag over here.
Yeah.
It's not a difficult job in that way at all. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have its own challenges.
Like every job, it's not physical, but you need to work your brains and you need to understand what you're doing. You're basically confronted with that algorithm that you have to try and figure out how to use to your own ends. And it can be super frustrating because sometimes something works and you're super happy. You're like, I cracked it. And the next time you try that same technique, it doesn't work at all. Because you don't know what cracked it. Was it the thumbnail, the title, the content itself? Was it reshared by someone because that specific topic was super interesting? Unless you go into the super detailed analytics of every video, of every single video that worked out, you don't know what worked. And honestly, I don't have time for that. I don't want to. So I'm just making my stuff. My thumbnails are almost always the same. And I don't care because like people watch them enough that it works for me. Well, so I stopped bothering with that.
I think with your thumbnails, they are so your channel. Like, if I see a thumbnail in your style, I know instantly, without seeing the name, without seeing anything else about it, where that video is from.
Well, that was the goal, to have a very recognizable thing, because in the subscription feed, like, people have 30, 40, 50, 100 channels, and so first, not everything is shown, because like it's supposed to be a feed of all your subscriptions, but it's not. Some videos are just not going to appear.
It hasn't been a feed of everything for like a good 10 years.
It's stupid. And so you need to stand out a little bit. So I don't want to do the weird faces because I never like them, and like no shade on people who do it. I understand it.
And Hawaiian shirts.
Exactly, but it works. I mean, it's been proven for a lot of channels that it works. For me, it never did. Every time I tried it, I got less clicks and less interaction, probably because I didn't start with them. So I don't want to do them. And so I needed something that is flashy and very visible. And I think like this white, big fat white cutout with very colored backgrounds, I think it pops out compared to everything else that's done. And so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the topic is just not interesting. But that's what you have to contend with, basically. You never know if something you make is going to work well or not. You can always be surprised. For example, I made a Unix, how Linux ate Unix video. I was expecting this to perform super poorly. Like it's a history lesson on an OS that no one has used for 20 years. No one cares about this. It's got more than 100,000 views in less than a month. And stuff like, hey, is Flathub going evil? I was expecting this one to perform really well, and it really didn't.
Yeah.
You never know. It's the weird thing with YouTube. And sometimes you just fail multiple times in a row, and this starts getting depressing. Like when the 3 or 4 latest videos are just not performing according to expectations, you start feeling not attacked, but worried. And that's something you have to deal with as a YouTuber.
Yeah, you always love seeing 10 out of 10 videos. They're great.
Oh, that's the worst. Sometimes you know it's going to be 10 out of 10. So you're like, okay, it's going to be the worst, but that's something I like. I want to talk about it. I'm doing it anyways. Like stuff that I did on the Fediverse and Mastodon, I knew was just not going to work all that well. I knew it.
There was a period where if you got that out like as... You know, everyone was freaking out about Mastodon, about Twitter. I think then, they popped off. Like, I had a video from, I think, 2 years ago about how to actually get started on Mastodon. That video, like, spiked up, even though no one's watched it in ages when that happened. During that period, if you got something out then, but as, like, a typical thing, no one really cares.
No one cares all that much. And I, for example, now realize that I made a strategic mistake in my content production, because I had planned a video on Mastodon and I had planned a video on the Fediverse. And I went logically like, I'm going to start with the Fediverse, explaining what it is, and I'll make the Mastodon video later. But if I had been clever, I would have released the Mastodon video as people were like, oh, we need to move to Mastodon. And I would have explained the Fediverse later. And as a result, the Fediverse video did relatively well, like 80,000 views in total in a few months, which is decent. But the Mastodon video that I released a month after everyone freaked out just didn't work at all.
Yeah.
So should have switched them, and probably the Mastodon video would have done a lot better, but the Fediverse video would also have done a lot worse. It's sometimes you have to make those decisions. It's basically like any other job. You have to decide stuff, except you never know that your decision will work in the current context. You have less clues than usual, basically.
Yeah. I think the only stuff you can be certain on is when it's something like Ubuntu 23.04.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
things like...
that's gonna...
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or...
or just like the latest version of KDE, the latest version of Gnome, or the latest Ubuntu, a relatively well-known distro new release. Of course, that's gonna do some views. Yes, generally it will. But everything that is based on a news piece or an opinion or something, you never know. You never know if people are going to get interested in them.
I think, like, one that I'm surprised popped off is I see replacing Google Drive, OneDrive, or iCloud with these better alternatives. That did almost 200k views. Like, I would not think that video would do that well.
Almost every video I made for replacing Google services worked relatively well. They almost all did relatively well. Yeah, and I mean I remade a few because like the first I made were like 4 years back when I filmed myself with my phone, and it was just like the quality. There was no script. They were garbage. So I just wanted to remake them to be more modern. And some of the options I talked about just disappeared in the meantime, or I've changed. So. But yeah, generally all the privacy related stuff generally does not do all that well, but the de-googling stuff kind of does on my channel.
Okay.
Like if it's just how to be more private using this thing, no one cares. But if it is alternatives to Google services, then yeah, a lot of people are going to be interested, at least on my channel. But I also started addressing these topics like 3 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago, so...
Yeah, I feel like
probably people subscribe exclusively for that kind of stuff, basically.
I feel like every time I have an inkling of an understanding of what's gonna do well, I upload something that should, by all accounts, do really well. And then, no. Not at all. And
I have the exact same issue, yeah.
But
you're like, this one, oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
Oh, this one, I can't wait to post it. You publish it, you look 30 minutes later, and you're like, what? No, what? Come on, there's a bug. No, there's no bug. Just that you don't know. Like maybe YouTube didn't think there was an ad they could place on it, and so they never promoted it because they couldn't make money off of it. It can be anything.
Funnily enough, there have actually been bugs a couple of times when that happened. Like, I upload a video where I'm like, this video is going to do super well. I wake up and it's like 100 views. Like, when it's that bad, I'm like, okay,
you know
something is wrong right now.
Yeah. It hasn't been correctly made public, or it hasn't been sent to anyone, or there's an issue there. Absolutely, yeah.
Occasionally,
and sometimes it just takes a few hours to catch up. Like, at some point, I had a video that it was really underperforming, like probably like it was my first video ever. Terrible. I'm like, it can't be. Like, I can understand that people would not be that interested, but this kind of low performance is just not possible. It's not possible. And it just took, I don't know, an hour or two to actualize the counter of views. It just stayed stuck. And at some point it's like, oh, you had 300 views? No, you 3,500. Oh, okay. Well, that seems bad, but that's better.
Yeah,
it's YouTube is weird.
When you're dealing with a platform as big as YouTube, it's going to be eventual consistency. It's going to be, at some point, things will line up and it will give you proper data, but... And that's the same reason why if you look at your dashboard and you look at the video, the number of views are going to be different. Yeah. Because there's different systems tracking these numbers. And yeah, when you have a server that goes across the entire world, you don't want to have it so it's always consistent. If you do that, then everything is just going to be constantly locking up. It's better to like have the numbers be wrong and then deal with it later, pretty much.
And usually you're going to see more views when you're checking out like YouTube Studio than what people will actually see under the video.
Yeah.
Because YouTube Studio will give you just every single view, and the YouTube player will check and stay, and it's gonna stash some views on the side to check if they are bot related or anything. What you're seeing as a creator is generally less filtered than what you're seeing as a user, which makes sense.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you probably shouldn't be looking at the numbers that often anyway. Just like,
Yeah.
let the video do its thing. If it's not performing well, no amount of watching, this is something I've had to deal with. No amount of watching the video is going to make the numbers do better. Just
Absolutely.
make the next one. Hopefully the next one does better. Try to work out maybe some way to change up what you're doing. What matters in the end is if you're making good content and you're putting in a reasonable amount of effort in titling it and thumbnailing it, it is going to get attention over time. over time.
Yeah. Unless you're talking about a very specific event that only matters for like 3 days in a year, like every video will start picking up at some point. It's very rare to have a video that stays stuck and gains 0 more views after it's published. Most of them will keep climbing up a little bit slowly and slowly. And that's also what makes YouTube viable as a job in the long run. The longer you do it, and the more of these, like, I think everybody calls them evergreen videos. They're like videos that always stay relevant, or at least stay relevant for a long time. The more you have of these, and the more you keep posting, at some point, those evergreen videos are going to represent like half of your monthly revenue on YouTube and half of your monthly views. And so the more you make, the more you have that baseline. And it also insures you against like very bad months when none of your videos perform well.
Yeah.
And that's also why you cannot just quit your job and become a YouTuber after your first video. Unless you're insanely lucky or talented, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
You have to have that let's say, stash of older videos that can generate those views.
Yeah, when you're mentioning that that history video that you didn't think would do well, history videos are one of those things that I've noticed actually do pretty well on my channel. I like going back and, I did a video on the Halloween documents, for example. I did a video about sort of the rivalry between KDE and Gnome. I think the first video I did where I realized this was an interesting topic was I went back and looked at the history of the Unix philosophy, and that video I didn't think would do well. I just wanted to do it because I was like, this is going to be a neat thing to talk about, because a lot of people were just like, this application doesn't follow the Unix philosophy. But I wanted to
really
see
understanding what it was.
Yeah. And that video, let's see if I can find it. How Unix, if I look here, what did I even call it? Is this it? Wait, is this it? Or is this another one? No, this is a different one. What is this video even called? Let's see. If we Brody Robertson Unix philosophy. Here we go. Yeah, Unix philosophy more than just a simple slogan, which probably I could have probably titled that one better. But at the maybe that was a bad example, because that one at the time did really well, but hasn't really picked up long term. One that picked up long term, which I was really surprised about, is like 3 years ago, I did a video about setting up multi-monitors on Xorg. And I thought this was a topic that, had already been covered to death, basically. And at the time, the video, it did middlingly well, but over the years, for some reason, it's just kept picking up and picking up and picking up.
I have the same one about setting up OBS with NVEnc, which at the time was super tedious to do. You had to run a few command lines, you had to recompile FFmpeg. It sucked. So I made a video about it. And nowadays, it's completely useless. But I still get comments on it like, oh, it doesn't work for me. Well, yes, because it's like 5 years old. And now you can just one-click install OBS as a Flatpack or a Snap, and it's just gonna work instantly. And you have NVEnc immediately. You don't have anything to do. So I should maybe like put something like old in brackets so people stop watching it. But it's still fun. Like, people are still looking up that issue right now, which, I mean, I would have thought no one would, but
the way that people treat YouTube is very, like, it's really different to a platform like Twitter. Like, no one would go to a tweet from, like, 5 years ago. Like, say, for example, it's like, Donald Trump has been elected as president, and then no one would go to that tweet and be like, no, he's not the president anymore, Biden is now the president. Like, but it was a tweet from when he was. No, but people will go to a YouTube video that's like 5, 6 years old, like, this doesn't work. Like,
this doesn't work.
It doesn't. It's
Yeah,
old.
or like you make a video 5 years ago saying Wayland does not support native fractional scaling, and then someone today comments, "Yes, it does." Well, yeah, but you changed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's yes,
YouTube's
it's normal.
it's a weird platform like that because it doesn't. The date is there, like you can see how old the video is, but everyone just seems to ignore it and just
Yeah,
treat it as
and
if it
just
just came
assume
out.
that if it's still there, if it's still live, then it's gotta be still relevant.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, I can also understand that viewpoint, but I'm not about to go back and retitle my 400 old videos to try and make them look like they're old. Like,
Yeah.
I have other things to do.
Yeah,
So,
no. Yeah, it's totally fair. I don't know. YouTube's a weird platform. I enjoy
yeah.
making the videos, and it's given me this education in Linux that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Like, there's a lot of things that I probably have a deeper knowledge of the history of Linux than any person reasonably should. And it's all because I've decided to make all these videos on these various different aspects and just find out what's going on. Just explore it just for the sake of exploring it.
I learned a lot as well because when I started the channel, I had not used Linux, let's say daily for like five years. I didn't even own a computer when I started the channel. I bought a computer to start a channel. So yeah, and
Yeah.
the only reason I started a channel about Linux is because that computer came with Endless OS because I had no money to buy a Windows license.
Oh, okay.
I didn't keep Endless OS because I didn't want to, but yeah, it's I used Linux afterwards, and it rekindled my love for it. But I also learned a lot. Like when I picked it back up, I didn't even know that Wayland existed. I didn't know what it was. I still had all my mental images of what it was to use Linux in 2013, 2015, and in 2018, 2019, it was very, very different. So I learned a lot, and it was super interesting. And it's what I love about this job. It's like sometimes you just have a topic and you're like, I need to talk about this. This looks important. I have to cover it. And while you're working on other videos, this thing is in the back of your mind. You're like, I know nothing about this. What am I going to talk about in this video? And then you start researching it for hours and hours. And you're like, okay, I think I have a reasonable understanding of this. You make a video, you publish it, and then you get tons of information that adds up. People comment and say, oh, you should also read this or watch this, or you should read this discussion, and you learn even more and more and more. And it's that way that I find really interesting in that job that I never felt about any other job that I ever had.
No, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah, I don't even know what to add to that. I just agree. Yeah, I just completely agree. Yeah. I don't know.
I think, yeah, you just learn as much as you're helping other people learn, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a two-way street job. It's not like you're just asked to produce something in exchange for money. You do that, but you also receive in exchange. And that's rare, I think, in a job.
Yeah, a lot of the videos that I've made, I sort of made for my own purpose. Like, especially back when I was doing a lot of like tutorial stuff for window managers, sometimes I would just forget how to do something, and there wasn't a good resource out there on how to do it. So it's like, hey, I'll just make it myself. And it's like, oh, thank you, Brody. That's how you do that. Right, cool. I've gone back to my old videos like, oh, right, that's how that works, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I did the same with a few older tutorials back when I needed them again. And that's basically my approach to most of my topics. It's what did I learn recently, or what would I want to know more about? And generally, when I approach a topic, it's not like I have instant knowledge of everything.
Yeah.
I just learn about it by making the video. And sometimes I make mistakes, like everybody. Like I just didn't research something enough, or I misunderstood something, or I missed a little thing that would have changed maybe the conclusion. But that's also part of the learning process. And you don't get all those opportunities in a regular job because people expect you to do a certain job, so you're supposed to know how to do it already.
Yeah.
And you can add to that, but you're not going to learn a whole new aspect of it while you're practicing. And that's something that YouTube gives you, which is cool.
Yeah, I think when you do end up making those mistakes, though, it's it's important to be like, okay, acknowledge the mistake, and then move on. It's like,
Yeah.
there's no point. If someone wants to correct me about something in the comments, that's totally fine. What annoys me is when people try to correct me on things that they are wrong about. It's like,
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Please do, like, if you didn't watch the video, you didn't understand what was being said, I don't care about your gotcha. Like, it's not exactly like that. It's like this. Like, that's not what I said. Go away. But if you have a legitimate concern, like what's a good example? In that reply video I did to DT, I didn't mention the fact that in GNOME, there are extensions to add, like, burning windows, cube, things like that. And, like, yeah, that's a totally fair thing that I missed, and I probably should have made mention of that. Like, that's totally fine. But, you know, when it's the people that are like, you said GNOME, it's actually GNOME. No.
Yeah.
Go away.
No,
I
it's
don't
not.
care.
Go away. Who cares? Like, why? Why are you saying this? Who cares?
Yeah.
And when I titled my video "How Linux Ate Unix," and someone's like, "Oh, it didn't eat it because macOS is technically Unix, and so yes, it still exists and it's still commercial." Like, I'm talking about a system named Unix. Yes, macOS is a Unix compatible system listed on the Unix page, but that's a technicality and no one cares. I'm not going to title my video "How Linux Ate Unix Apart from macOS." Like, dude, you interact on the content, not the title.
Yeah.
But of course, legitimate mistakes like, hey, you got that wrong. This is actually like the date you used is wrong, or actually HP never did this or did that. Cool. And I'm always willing to learn from that. And I will always accept a comment like that and never react like, oh, shut up and block the user. If you have a valid criticism or mistake pointing, I will always accept it as long as it's worded politely.
Yeah.
If you come at me with a technicality, a stupid thing, and you're being offensive, you're kicked off, basically. I'm just hiding you from the channel so I never have to see your weird takes again. That's how I rule my channel. It's not a democracy.
No. No, definitely
it's
not.
my channel. I do whatever I want there. And if you're being rude, then you're out. But if you have something interesting, I'm always happy to learn from it. And it's also kind of humbling because at the start, after maybe a year or year and a half, I was feeling very confident because the channel was picking up. And so I was making videos relatively fast. I was sure of what I knew and I created stuff. And sometimes I got things wrong. And at some point, I don't remember which video it was, but I made something that really was not that well researched. It was not that good. And I just pointed people towards stuff that would not work for most people because I completely overlooked something. I don't remember what it was. It was a tutorial of some sort. People in the comment pointed this out. Like, it doesn't work. Be careful. This tutorial does not work on anything other than Ubuntu-based distros. And I was like, at first I felt like super attacked. Like, why? No, that's not true. And I tried it out and I'm like, okay, I missed a big thing.
Yeah.
And so you're humbled. And then the next time you're going to research your stuff way more carefully and try to bring all the information that people really need and be as precise as possible. Because you don't want to put out content that just doesn't work or makes you feel like an idiot. It's a humbling experience as well. It's not like all your learning is turning you into this like super powered, ultra big knowledge base. You still make tons of mistakes, and it's okay to admit that.
Yeah, exactly. When you were saying about the people that are being, like, you know, disrespectful, I think there is this. It's definitely not everyone. It's definitely not most people, but there's a subset of people that are like, it's like not treating you as if you are a person. It's like, dance, monkey, dance. You are here for our entertainment. And yeah, those people, I'm just not going to deal with you. I've got better things to do with my time. One great example of this is I've had some people be like, this video is not your best content, or, you know, your video is bad. And there's not any extension after that. Yeah. I know that you're full of shit and you're making stuff up because you didn't explain anything. If you actually gave a reason for why what you're saying is true, maybe I'll take your opinion seriously. But if all you can say is this is bad, like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, you're not giving me any feedback. You're just yelling into the wind, seeing if someone's gonna bite. That's
Exactly.
a terrible metaphor.
It's like walking down the streets, pointing at someone, saying, "Oh, you're ugly." Like, why are you doing that? Like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't do that to someone you don't know, which generally you don't know a YouTuber personally that you watch. You wouldn't do that in real life. Why do you do it on the internet? It's not more acceptable. It's the same. It's just as rude and stupid. And so, yeah, these people I just don't deal with. But
Yeah.
and I'll be honest, people who write me like a full-on novel
Yeah, please
of
don't write an
like
essay.
point-by-point refutation or agreement. Sometimes it's point-by-point agreement and complimenting what I said. And it looks super interesting, but I just don't have time to read all of that.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I scroll, I'm like, what the hell? This person wrote the entire script of my video in answer to my video.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
okay, but I just can't read that. I don't have time. Be concise. Write multiple comments. Like, write multiple comments point by point. But if you make a giant one like that, there's no way it's going to be read.
Do you try to read all your comments, or have you tried to slow down with that? How do you...
I read all of them, but I don't answer all of them.
Right, yeah, fair enough.
Well, I think I read all of them. Basically, every day I set aside about an hour and a half to scroll through the YouTube Studio app. I just filter by stuff I haven't answered to, and I scroll back to the point where I remember I was last time. So sometimes I will miss some stuff, but generally I'm able to read everything. This lets me block a few really offensive people and weirdos, and this also lets me like answer to legitimate questions and IDs and stuff like that. But I don't have time to answer everyone. It's just not doable.
No, that's fair enough.
Generally, if I agree with what you're saying and I like it, I'll just heart the comments. So there's a bunch of comments that I heart on every video, but that's about it. That's most of my interactions. And for really the questions or the interesting things that appear, I tend to try and comment back, but it's time consuming and you cannot do it for everything.
Yeah, I find if a lot of people have a similar concern, like with the not mentioning the GNOME extensions for burning Windows. I think I had like 5 or so people say the exact same thing. With things like that, I tend to just pin a comment. It's just easier to do it like that and just respond to all of them at once. Well,
yeah, if you really missed something or if you made a big mistake, then the easiest is just write a comment, pin it, and just say, okay, yeah, I know, I apologize, I forgot this, or I acknowledge that this is missing. A lot of people will still comment it, but at least a lot of people will see that, okay, no need to remind him of that, and that's good.
Yeah, earlier today, the video I put out, I mentioned something in the Steam runtime called Pressure Vessel. I kept calling it Pressure Valve, and people they didn't know what I was talking about. It's like, oh, yes, I'm aware, I'm stupid, I can't read. Ignore that. I know it's Pressure Vessel. Nothing else changes about what I'm saying. It's just, I can't read. Ignore that.
Yeah, well, in one of my videos, I was talking about snaps and flatpacks, and I said, I prefer flatpacks for servers, but I think flatpacks are better in general. I meant I prefer snaps for server stuff, but flatpacks are generally better. And like, avalanche of comments like, what is that a joke? Or people understood that I had a brain fart or something. And but a lot of people just did not get that, and they were like, I don't understand what you're saying, you're very unclear. Like, okay, sorry, it's in the paragraph and the chapter talking about snaps, and I just said that they ran on servers, so you can deduce it, but okay, I also understand why you're commenting this.
No, I get it, it makes sense, but it's when people try to use those as like a gotcha, like, see, I knew you were wrong about this. See, I knew you didn't know anything about Linux.
You're a fraud.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, get out.
I'm not going to deal with gotcha comments. Like,
just if you don't like it, go watch something else. You don't have to tell me you don't like it.
Yeah, it's not an airport. You don't have to announce when you're departing. Like, go away.
Yeah. Or can you imagine doing that at a store? Like, you go into the store, you buy a banana, you start eating. Oh, I lost my light. Almost got killed by my light here. Fantastic. So you go to the store, you buy a banana, and you get out, you eat the banana, you don't like it, and you get back to the store, you're like, your banana is disgusting.
Yeah.
No one does that. You just don't go back to the store. That's it. Like, why? Why is that acceptable on the internet? I don't know.
For reference, how is that light set up? Is it just sitting on a stand or something? What happened
It's
there?
absolutely just sitting on a tripod, which is mounted on top
Oh.
of my screen with nothing specific. It's
Oh.
it's a number of equilibrium with 2 legs in the front of the screen and 1 in the back.
Okay.
It's DIY. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I've got my...
This is the light in question. This is it. And this is resting
Ah.
on top of the screen like that.
Oh, yep. Okay.
Quality YouTuber technology.
Yeah, I've got my lights set up the same way that the lights behind you are set up. So they're on stands, and they're not going to fall over, probably.
Yeah.
Well...
Yeah, I need to find somewhere, but my desk is like glued to the wall because this room is super small. It's like 9 square meters. It's very, very tiny. And so my desk is glued to the wall, and there's no way I can put a light behind my monitor. So I don't know. Maybe something with an arm could come up. I don't know.
Yeah, or if you wanted...
I need to find something.
What I used to do is I actually have my light on the same sort of mic arms that these have. It doesn't have the correct mount, but if you get a clamp mount, you can just like stick it on there, and that should do the job. This arm is, for that light, it should be fine. Like this can hold up my Shure. It used to hold up a Blue Yeti.
Yeah, it's super heavy as a mic, so it should handle any light that doesn't have a big battery attached.
Yeah, if you're not sticking those light boxes on there, it'll be fine. But yeah, I guess we can end off the show. We're just passing the... We're getting to 2 hours and 15 minutes. So let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm on YouTube at The Linux Experiment. I'm on Mastodon at The Linux EXP, and I'm also on PeerTube with the same channel name, and on Odyssey, if you use that, with the same channel name as well. And that's about it. And I also have an audio podcast that I do for all the Linux news. It's like 45 minutes per week of a recap of everything happening in Linux and open source. And you can find it at podcast.thelinuxexp.com. Or follow it on Mastodon. It's at TLE News Podcast.
It sounds like it is much more produced than this rambling nonsense we're doing here.
It's really not. I have no music, no intro, no splitters, no nothing. I just say, hey, this is Nick, this is what we're talking about, and let's go. And I just have basic bullet points in a script. It's not really a well-produced show at all.
Well, at least...
I honestly just created it because Castopod exists as a platform to distribute podcasts, and I found it fun, and people liked it, so I kept making it.
At least you have a like a direction, a goal for the show. Here, I've spent half an hour in some shows talking about... I think last week I spent like half an hour talking about the birth rate in South Korea or something. I don't know why,
but it's varied.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Sure, that's one way to look at it. Yeah, is that all of the things you want to mention?
I think that's about it, yeah.
Cool. As for me, if you're listening to the audio version of this, the video version is available on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. The audio version is available on every podcast platform, RSS feed, search Tech Over Tea, you'll find it. The gaming channel is Brody on Games. And the main channel, Brody Robertson, do Linux videos 6-ish days a week, probably, most of the time, unless something goes weird. And yeah, do you have any final words that you want to say?
I don't understand how you manage to create 6 videos per week.
I
don't know how you manage that. I would be dying.
Look, when I went through uni, I worked like 50 hours a week on uni, so it's just an extension of that. Yeah.
Well, good job. I could not do that today.
You just do nothing but make videos, basically. I don't make videos on the weekend. Weekends are entirely video free. So I'm gonna edit this next week. Yeah. Anyway, I already said that, didn't I? Any final words? No, nothing else.
No, no other final words.
Yeah, no. Okay. I guess we'll just end it there. Bye. See you guys later.
Bye.